Hello, everyone, and welcome to Project Ready TV. I am your host today, Tedra Coakley, and I am the Education and Media Coordinator at the Urban League of the Upstate. And today we are here with Brad Nelson of Balance Sense Financial Coaching. Hi, Brad.
Hey, Tedra, how are you?
I am well. How are you doing?
I am doing fantastic. Really excited to be on today and talk a little bit about some money.
Yes, we love money. And our theme for this month is financial literacy, and we want our students to learn a little bit about budgeting. So, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself before we dive in.
Yeah, absolutely. So I got into financial coaching because myself and my family, we struggled with money and personal finance since we got out of college. And unfortunately, this was something that we weren't really ever taught how to do. So we made a lot of really poor choices in our 20s and even some of our early 30s. And it really kind of didn't set us up for success. So we decided to start really learning very much like kind of like what we're doing here today, learning how money and personal finance really work, learning how to budget, learning the simple habits of saving and being patient and paying cash for things rather than relying on credit cards and debt. And we eventually became completely debt free, and we live with no debt, no credit cards, no mortgage, no car payments. And we decided to start helping people with this same subject because when we became debt free, a lot of people started asking us for help. And so we started just doing it kind of on our own, not even really doing it as a business. And we had so many people still asking, we decided to open up our own financial coaching business and just on a small scale, teaching people how this, money and personal finance stuff really works and how to set yourself up for short-term success and also long-term success when it comes to thinking like big picture, like retirement and those sorts of things. So.
Yes, and I can attest to what you've been teaching all these years because I have taken your course and it has helped me. I'm not debt free yet, but I am getting there. So I'm hoping that you can share your wisdom with our students so they can get on track because as I learned from you, it's never too early to start getting on the right financial foot.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's no question about it. Early is better than later. if you can get out of high school or get out of college and have a good plan stepping out into the real world, you are going to do yourself and your family and your life absolute wonders when it comes to your finances. So earlier is better than later. There's no question.
Definitely. So since we're here to talk about budget, let's talk about what exactly is a budget.
Yeah, let's so when it comes to budgeting, it really is all about budgeting and taking account for the money that you bring into your home. So depending on your age, I know when I was a teenager, I was working at Kentucky Fried Chicken. So when I worked at Kentucky Fried Chicken, I would make a paycheck and you bring in that paycheck and you decide how you're going to spend that money and what your money is going to go to. And essentially what you want to do when it comes to your budgeting is prioritize the essential expenses first and kind of prioritizing that list all the way down to the non-essential things. So for an adult, when you get to be an adult and you start having normal adult type expenses like rent or a mortgage or even maybe a car payment or car insurance, you're going to want to go through and prioritize and say, okay, what are the most important things that I need in my life to the least important things? And you basically would just pay them in that order. Where it gets hard for us as adults and even for kids is marketing, right? So we're sold a lot of products in today's world. And with a lot of those products, they offer a lot of financing options. So where a lot of people tend to get themselves into trouble is they take on too much financing and too much debt to pay for things that their budget really can't afford. And that's when you can start essentially spending more money than you're actually making. And that's when your budget is busted, right? So that's what what we don't want. So that's why it's really important to have a good foundational budget, one that prioritizes your most essential expenses and also prioritizes saving. And if you can start the process and the habit of saving early and often, you literally, without a doubt, in the United States, can become a self-made millionaire by the time you retire if you can practice those habits of saving early and often.
That sounds amazing. I wish that I had known all of this and started this when I was a kid. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. And I too was one of those adults who kind of made mistakes after I finished college and got into the real world. And the marketing definitely gets me. I don't know about you, but this quarantine has me wanting to buy everything. I have refrained though, but I see so many things in that I probably wouldn't see because I'm not home all day, and I'm like, "Ooh, I want to buy that," and oh, let me add this to my cart. But it is difficult, but I feel like because we have more time on our hands, I have been able to spend more time on my budget. But I know for kids, in school, they might have a job, or maybe they get an allowance from their parents,
Sure.
or they might just have money from birthdays and Christmas. So as a student who's just starting to get an understanding of how money works, what's the best thing for them to do to put these practices in place so that when they do get to be adults, they've got it down and they don't have to worry about all the temptations and they have a good financial footing.
Yeah, I think for teenagers, it's actually a really easy process. So what we do is I would suggest that you break it down into kind of two or three categories depending on how you want to do this. So you could break it down into a give category. So when you get your money in, you're gonna put a little bit of your money aside to give. So for instance, Christmas presents, birthday presents, things maybe you give to a local church that you go to, whatever it might be. That's going to be your give category. So you're going to want to put a certain percentage of your income towards that bucket. The second area is save. All right. So saving has got to be a priority. So it's important in a good financial plan, even if you're a teenager, is to start establishing some goals. I know when I was a teenager, one of my goals was to have a car, right? I mean, that's kind of probably a lot of people's, at least short-term goal when they're a teenager. Or maybe it could be buying shoes or clothes, or it might be something like that. But have a savings goal, something that you're saving and working towards. That savings habit will teach you patience and also will teach you how to delay gratification, meaning that instead of the I have to have it now attitude and you go into credit card debt to buy what you want today, you learn the habit of saving up, paying cash, and delaying gratification. So instead of having it today, it might take you maybe 4 or 6 weeks to get it instead, but you're not going to owe anybody when that item is finally paid for. And then the third area is really your spending. Okay. So you've got give, save, and spend. And those would be the three areas that you would want to break it up. When you talk about spending, it could be, school lunches. It could be going out with your friends. There is money that you can put aside for actively spending. And what we like to call is just enjoying life from day to day.
Okay, that sounds good. I think that our students could definitely benefit from using those tools now and be able to translate them into what they have to look forward to when they become adults, the real bills and things like that. um, but as far as just everything that you've learned from the time you were a student yourself and since becoming a financial coach up to now, what do you think was the most important piece of financial advice you've been given?
Um, I think, I always go back to the saving because I see how important, and we probably don't want to go into this too much here today, but if you have time and you're home and you're listening to this, look up compound interest and just type into Google and type up retirement calculator. And let's say you put in the age you are today. Let's say you're 15 and you retire at age 65, and you start to say, I'm going to put away every single month, say $50 a month, and it'll never change. It's just $50 a month between now until the time you're 65 years old. With compound interest and how investing works, you would retire a very wealthy person just by putting that money in very early on in your age, at the age of 15 years old, 16 years old, 17 years old, or even when you turn 18 and you're a legal adult. For me, I look at some of those numbers and it makes my heart hurt, the opportunity I missed because I stepped out into the adult world and I bought new cars. I bought the latest clothes. I went into credit card debt. I bought things I couldn't afford. And I got to tell you, that is a very painful lesson to learn. So, looking back, and it's one thing that I work with my kids on even now, is teaching them the habit of saving. I think if more people could get that down, I think a lot of the issues that we've got going on right now, even with what we're dealing with today with the pandemic, a lot of people, if they would have had more of a savings, we probably wouldn't be feeling nearly as much financial stress in the country as we're feeling right now. But savings is just, it's just crucial. And if more people would do that, especially at a young age, you will thank yourself over and over and over again.
Definitely. I have been working on building my savings and, definitely using what you taught me. I got my tax refund and I put it right in the bank, didn't touch it. So that's probably the first time I've ever done that. And I
Yeah.
have you to thank. So I really appreciate that, Brad.
Awesome.
But do you think it would be beneficial for a parent and their child to go to the bank and open up a savings account for their child so that way they can start to understand how banks work and interests and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, how a parent might introduce some of these ideas is going to be based on obviously maturity level of the child, and if they're working. But yeah, checking accounts, savings accounts, I think are great ideas. Even maybe possibly introducing a debit card at some point and teaching them the process of making sure that they got money in a checking account to use a debit card. I think those are all fantastic habits. And honestly, I think sitting down with your parents are ultimately your best example of as to how to do some of this stuff, or maybe a best teacher in a way of sitting down and showing you, okay, these are our basic household utilities. This is how much we pay for electric. This is how much we pay for our rent and our mortgage. This is what it costs to feed our family. I think as a young adult going into, or a young teenager going into adulthood, I think those are really good numbers to actually realize and think about. Yeah, I mean, making an income is important, and controlling that money that's coming into the house is definitely important. Another thing a family could do for a child that's working, if you really want to get serious about saving early and saving right now, is you could look into things that even saving for college with 529 plans. You could look at custodial Roth IRAs where a child in their teenage years could even start saving for retirement as long as they have earned income, which is, again, working at, a job or having that regular paycheck come in. So there's lots of different things that kids can get into that would benefit them greatly as they become adults in the real world. There's no question.
That sounds good. I know some of our students are working, so hopefully they will take your advice and start planning and saving, and maybe even talking to their parents about getting them a bank account if they don't already have one. Is there do you have any advice as far as the best type of bank account for the students? Like, should they go to like a virtual bank where they can get more interest, or should they just stick to a regular brick and mortar bank for now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the parent. I think what their comfort level is. I'm a fan of both. I've got both. I've got an internet-based bank that we have our large emergency fund savings at because we get a better interest rate there. But our local just banking is with our checking account is just done at a local, brick and mortar branch that we have right here in our town. So I think from a teen, if it was me and my child, what we're probably going to do is have them open up an account that's somewhere local, because then they can learn the process of going to the bank, maybe even cashing a check, seeing the money come into the bank, go out of the bank, introducing that debit card. So they get the understanding and the flow of how money really kind of works in the financial system itself, how you make money because money comes from work, and then how that money gets put into the financial system, how you can use that money for your purchases and for saving. So I think locally is probably going to be the better teaching example, but I think both could work, especially in the environment that we live in now where everything's online.
Okay. Now, I already know the answer to this, but our students don't. And so I think it's really important for them to hear it. But what would you say to them getting a credit card?
I would say don't by all costs just stay away from it. I think in today's day and age, I think if you look at the statistics on credit cards, most people are losing that battle. Most people are in really good sized credit card debt. In fact, the average household right now is anywhere between, this is just the average across the board, even counting those people who don't have credit card debt, is between $7,500 to $8,000 per household.
Wow.
So that's not a good plan. So I would say you're much better off avoiding credit cards altogether if you can. Now, some people might say, well, how do I build a credit score if I have to, say, rent out an apartment and things like that? And those are valid arguments, and those arguments do hold some water. But I think from a teenage standpoint, or from a young teenager standpoint, I think credit cards just don't even need to be a part of the conversation at this point. But there are things that you can do as you approach adulthood and as you start thinking about how I can obtain renting properties and being able to do things, because there's this idea out there that you need to have a credit score to do all of them, and the actual truth is that a lot of that is false. That's what the financial industry wants us to know or hear, because they want us to be in debt. So my recommendation would be to try to stay away from credit cards at all costs. If you did have to, and you do go into use a credit card, the best situation would be to obtain a credit card that has a very low balance or a low credit limit on it, or credit line. You can get some for 100 or 200 or $300 max, meaning that you really can't do yourself that much damage. The downside to this approach, though, is credit card companies like to raise those credit limits over time, and that's where you can get yourself into a little bit of trouble with that. So it's a fine line. I think it really kind of is based on the overall goal of the individual, but I think for most individuals, especially young teens and young adults, they could easily get through life without having to worry about credit cards.
That is great advice. And I think everyone should heed that because I think everybody here has everybody here, but everybody in my office has a credit card. And um, I know it's something that we deal with because we have a housing department. So we actually help people in the community find housing, and we talk to them about budgeting and getting their money together so that they can afford to purchase a home or to even just, rent an apartment. So it's definitely something that a lot of people think that they need because it's kind of like a way of life now.
Yeah.
It's like, when you're 16, you get a car, and it's like when you turn 18, you get a credit card.
Yeah.
So I think that we could all use a little less credit and actually focus on using the money that we actually have a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look at the situation we're in right now, where the country's closed down, people are out of work, and people aren't running around asking for higher credit scores right now. They're running around looking for money. They want to work. They need money in their savings account. So when you see tragedies and things like this happen, you see how the most basic personal finance principles aren't being practiced by most people, and those are the things that you really need to focus on. And most people don't need to be in credit card debt right now where we are today. They need less credit card debt or no credit card debt. So I think staying away from it is going to be your best bet. There's no question. I've learned my lesson as well. I used to play, and it's very painful. Let's just put it that way.
Yes, I can attest to that. But this has been amazing. I think that um, our students are going to really get something out of this and hopefully start applying these principles. And from what you've said, they need to start planning their money if they, have money coming in regularly, and saving is super important. So they need to do that sooner rather than later. so they don't get into trouble once they get out into the real world and have things like a car note and mortgage. So, again, we appreciate you coming and sharing your infinite wisdom with us. Do you have anything else you'd like to add that you think our students should know?
Yeah, I think I what I would suggest to anyone that's young, and Tedder, you kind of asked what financial advice would I, and I mentioned saving would be the big thing, but I think the second thing is being committed to a life of education, especially when it comes to money. I think right now would be a great thing for you to do is pick up some personal finance books out there about money. There are basic things. There's even books out there written for teenagers, and I mean, Amazon is a great place to look at it as far as getting some of these resources and starting to learn about the subject of money. Because sadly, we're not being taught enough about this subject right now in today's society. And a lot of people are stepping out into adulthood, and they're not stepping into an environment where they're set up for success. So we have to take on that in our families individually. We have to step up in our families and say, we're going to teach our kids and we're going to show our kids how to do this stuff. So as a young teenager and someone who's going to be becoming a legal adult, I think it's a great thing to commit to educating yourself as much as possible about this. And as I mentioned with the saving, you will thank yourself over and over again for that education, because it will serve you well for the rest of your life. There's just no question about it.
I agree. I really wish that we had some financial literacy classes. When I was in school, I've been hearing that some schools around the country are starting to incorporate that into the curriculum, which is fantastic. But a lot of kids, unfortunately, they have to get the real world experience, which can get them into trouble. But I think that our country's starting to realize that if we don't get to the kids before they graduate high school, then it's gonna be pretty bad for all of us. So I'm glad they're doing that. Education is definitely important. So even if our students aren't getting that now, we have Google, we have, like you said, Amazon. There's so many resources out there where they can go and find this information, because even though it's not being taught, it's out there. We
Absolutely.
just have to take the initiative to go and find it. So hopefully you guys will take that definitely away from this, because that's important, because it's important to just know things for yourself. I mean, yes, you're an expert and you're telling us this, but it's also great to just go and read it for yourself so that you know, and you're not saying, oh, well, I heard this during this workshop that I was on, but yeah, I don't really know. So go out and find it and you'll definitely know. So I agree with that tremendously. All right, Brad. Well, this has been amazing. As always, it's a pleasure. We really appreciate having you, and maybe we can do this again on another topic. Who knows? Because there's so much to talk about with money. We could go on and on and on.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But we don't have a lot of time. But hopefully, this has been an eye opener for our students, and our parents if they are listening in as well. But it's been great, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day and you are staying safe.